everybody. This is the afternoon session of the Portland City Council, September 27th, 2017. Please call the roll.
Saltzman. Udaly.
Here.
Fritz.
Here.
Fish.
Here.
Wheeler.
Still here. First item, 1072.
1072, approve findings to authorize an exemption to the competitive bidding requirements and authorize the use of alternative contract method of construction manager, general contractor in connection with the Columbia Boulevard wastewater treatment plant secondary treatment expansion program for an estimated amount of $89 million.
Commissioner Fish.
Thank you, Mayor and colleagues. I want to invite Mike Jordan, the Director of the Bureau of Environmental Services, Larry Palat, Interim Chief Procurement Officer, and Muriel Gesa-Teufel. Is that close enough?
That is very
Thank you.
good.
Who is the BES Program Manager. And here's a brief introduction of the item before us. Excuse me. The $1.4 billion Big Pipe Project, otherwise known as the Combined Sewer Overflow Program, was completed on time and on budget in 2011, leading to a cleaner Willamette River and Columbia Slough. Stormwater that would have gone to the river and slough is instead being conveyed to the Columbia Boulevard wastewater treatment plant. This is protecting our rivers, but also leading to significantly higher peak flows to the plant. As BES undertakes this secondary expansion program, many individual projects are interconnected and require an integrated design and contracting process to minimize risk, control costs, and manage complex construction sequencing. Here with more information about this ordinance and the treatment plant before us are Mike, Muriel, and Larry. Welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Fish. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, for the record, my name is Mike Jordan. I'm the director at Bureau of Environmental Services, and I have very brief introductory comments which hopefully can frame some of the big drivers behind the project. Muriel can take you into the depths of the detail if you wish. And of course, we are here today primarily for a discussion around the procurement process for this work. As Commissioner Fish mentioned, the city spent about $1.44 billion on the Big Pipe, and we're here today to talk about an overall program that is somewhere in the 10% of that range. I would encourage the council to think about this work as the last phase of the Big Pipe project, because what we did basically is take a whole bunch of stormwater and wastewater that used to go into the river and into the slough, and now it finds its way to the Columbia Boulevard wastewater treatment plant. That presents us with some challenges at a piece of infrastructure that was originally built in 1952 and has had a myriad of projects over the decades, some of which are, quite frankly, out of service or should be. And we're on a confined site, which presents us with a bit of a domino effect issue as we build new facility on that site. So Muriel will go into some of those interrelationships, but generally think about the fact that on a wet day, say December 7th, 2015, we had instantaneous flows at the wastewater treatment plant of 450 million gallons per day. That is the design capacity of the plant. And so we need to do some things to the plant to make sure it can perform with all of that water during wet weather flows now reaching the plant when it didn't used to. Secondly, we've been in discussions now for a number of years with EPA and DEQ regarding the way we treat those storm waters during that wet weather flow. And the bottom line out of those discussions is that we need to expand the secondary treatment capacity at the plant. And what that's going to mean is building some new clarifiers, which take up a fair amount of space. And We have a number of facilities, again, that are going to have to be relocated. There are a number of issues at the plant that have long been operational problems that need to be done. And lastly, we've learned a lot about the operation from others who have had similar problems. So for instance, you may have heard about Seattle's wastewater plant that was down, quite frankly, for several months because a pipe burst within the tunnels and it filled with sewage, and all of the electronics in the plant were in the tunnels, and it basically shut everything down. Well, guess what? We have a fair number of the electronics in our plant in tunnels where very large pipes run through them. So we're going to be doing a number of projects to increase the reliability of the plant and deal with those issues. And it is a very complex, confined space, and there's a certain domino effect. Lastly, we're under a time frame. In our agreement with EPA, we need to complete these processes by 2024. And it is a lot of work, it is complicated, and having a process where we have designer and construction contractors working together with the operators to be able to optimize the schedule, it's really important for us. So with that.
Mike, let me just add one
Certainly.
comment. We would be remiss if we didn't extend an invitation to the mayor and my colleagues at their convenience to give them a tour of the wastewater facility. Todd Lofgren and I took the tour a couple of months ago, and it really is a marvel how this plant accommodates so much flow, how it treats the water, and at the end of the process returns it to the river. And the tour is very interesting. You kind of get insider's view, and you go into the whole system. So any of my colleagues that would like to have that tour at some point, we would be honored to host you.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'd be happy to do that.
Well, I took it when my oldest was a fifth grader. Obviously,
yes.
there's been various changes since then, and quite apart from not having to look after naughty fifth grade boys, would I be able to see any differences?
What year was your fifth grader going?
That's a good one.
I think-
97,
Oh,
97.
yes, you would see significant changes. The headworks, for one, is a huge change, where the initial flow comes into the plant. Huge, probably the newest part of the plant actually is there. But yes, you'd see significant changes.
I think another thing she'd see is the fruits of the really terrific collaboration we've had with the neighborhood and our partners, because as you know, Commissioner Fritz, for a long time there were concerns about odor. And one of the things that is stunning when you're there is how neutral the odor is, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But the technology behind that is fascinating.
Well, if I may just add, my fourth grader is exerting her independence, and I accept this tour. I will hold it over her head as a threat, and we'll see if that doesn't cause some improvement in her behavior. So I think that would be great.
We're happy to be helpful any way we can, Mr. Mayor.
Terrific. In all seriousness, I would like to see it, and before even the commissioner mentioned it, I feel remiss that I haven't seen it, so
We'd be
I
happy
actually
to,
like that.
we'll reach out to the offices, happy to set it up.
I'd be happy to accept your invitation, and I would like to invite you to BDS for the Life of a Permit tour as a thank you.
That's very collegial of you. Thank you. I take it up. I mean, look, we have a couple of tours in the utilities that are actually just fantastic. One is the wastewater facility, because it's, again, a marvel of technology, and the people that work there are just incredible. Obviously, the Bull Run watershed, which we had to curtail during the fires, but we urge you to take that on a regular basis and reconnect to that. And we have a few others, but those two in particular should be on your bucket list.
With that, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pass it over to Muriel to go through the
I feel
details.
so happy to work in wastewater treatment plant now. So, thank you, Mike. So my name is Muriel Gesa-Teufel. I'm a senior engineer at BES. I work at the treatment plant at Columbia Boulevard. So today, the purpose of the ordinance is really to authorize alternative contracting methods for this program. However, we wanted to take the opportunity to give you more background on the project. It's a large project for BES, and so I'll spend some time on the overview, the need for the project, the schedule, and then the request for the alternative contracting method. So in preparation for the tour, here is an overview map of the Columbia Boulevard Treatment Plant campus. Within the dotted lines there, you can see it's about 74 acres. The main site where we have a lot of the facility, which is south of the Columbia Slough between North Columbia Boulevard, is about 74 acres. We have north of the slough is about 37 acres, which is a biosolids lagoon. We also have a west property that is currently undeveloped. So the plant was built in 1952. It does serve more than 600,000 people. The average daily flow is about 76 million gallons per day. However, as a result of the CSO program, where we've been bringing stormwater flows to the treatment plant, we see peaks up to 450 million gallons per day. So that transfers in different technologies at the plant so that we can accommodate the wide variation in flows. And that makes our plant unique in that respect. So we have what we call a biological treatment process and a chemical treatment process. So the biological one is also referred to as the secondary treatment process. The chemical one is engaged only during peak storm flows. And in perspective, in the few years we've had since the last big pipe was put in service, the chemical treatment treats about 10 to 14% in volume of the flows that come to the plant. So most of the flows still go through that biological treatment process. So this chart is to illustrate the impact of the stormwater, the captured stormwater to the treatment plant. It's a timeline starting in 1995 and ending in 2017. On the y-axis, you see the million gallons per day that would come to the plant. So what it shows here, each blue dot is an average daily flow to the plant. In 2000, when we started the CSO program, we put the Columbia Slough consolidation conduit. That had great impacts to the slough. It didn't impact so much the treatment plants at the wastewater plant, the flows at the wastewater plant, because the volumes were not that great. So you do not see a difference in this case. Yeah. Then the West Pipe came online, and you see an increase already in the volumes of flows from 200 million gallons per day going all the way to 300 million gallons per day. And then finally, when the East Pipe came online, you see a further increase up to the 400 million gallons per day as an average daily flow. So at that point, this is the secondary treatment expansion program is really to deal with the quality of treatment at the plant as opposed to the hydraulic quantities that come to the plant. So we're not increasing the hydraulic capacity of the plant, we're increasing what goes to the secondary treatment process or the proportion that goes to biological treatment. It is mandated by the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality, and we have a mandate to be done by December 2024. The expansion of secondary treatment has been included in planning efforts for many years, since in the 90s, and was also included in the 2016 facilities plan, for which we came to council in October 2015 for a consultant contract. So the expansion, again, provides more biological treatment during a high rain event and added resiliency.
Could you do me a favor?
Yes.
And give me sort of the 101? What's the difference between biological treatment and what is the alternative and how does it work?
Absolutely. So biological treatment is where we use biomass, biology, to treat the pollutants in the wastewater. Right. So we grow biomass based on the food that's in the wastewater. And then once it goes into the aeration basins...
Okay, I'm sorry. No, sorry. Please continue. At least it's afterward.
once it goes.
Go back to the regular presentation.
Yeah. I'm not talking about headworks, at least.
Oh, I know.
Think of it as a very, very large septic tank you dump in a box of Rid-X.
Okay.
Same basic principle.
Okay, are those the open ponds we see? What-
No,
No.
well, open ponds would be a different technology, unless you're referring to our lagoons to the north end. So those are settling ponds that are stabilizing. They also are based on biology to do treatment. So essentially, the biological treatment uses biomass and not chemicals to do the treatment. And then chemical treatment uses polymers and ferric chloride, so coagulants and flocculants to really settle the solids, which are stormwater, very dilute, and to settle them really quickly.
Okay, so the biomass basically is environmentally, it's a softer footprint. Is that why we would prefer that?
No, it is the standard, is a conventional treatment for the treatment plants, and currently EPA is asking that as much flow as possible be sent to biological treatment.
Okay, very good. Okay, that's helpful.
So in the planning efforts since the 90s, we've been looking at expansion of secondary treatment. And back then, the only expansion that was envisioned was on the west property, which is across the railroad tracks and North Portland Road. That would have required digging big utility tunnels under the railroad track and the road. And in 1995 or in 2009, some cost estimates were done to evaluate the cost of adding 2 clarifiers on that west property. And in 2017 dollars, that was the equivalent of about $70 million to do that expansion. So that's about the point where we started negotiating with DEQ and saying, wait, we would rather not do that expansion and incur the cost right now. Could we please optimize our current assets for improved performance at the plant? So we entered into a mutual agreement and order in 2011 and said, let's not expand to the west, but instead improve the wet weather clarifiers. This is where we started. We added chemicals, so we added facilities to add chemicals and improve the performance of the peak wet weather flow treatment. And then we also added a lot of automation and gates to our current aeration basins to improve that process and improve its capacity. As part of our agreement, we also had committed to get back to DEQ and tell them about the performance and reevaluate if further expansion was needed. So we looked at some alternatives, 5 alternatives actually, and the one that provided the best cost-benefit ratio was to put these clarifiers, 2 additional clarifiers, but within the existing plant footprint. That provides a lot of operational benefits as opposed to the west property.
So where does the water re-enter the river?
It enters the river. It goes through 2 outfalls. We have 2 large outfalls that go into the Columbia River. So it's about 3 mile long.
Not into the slough here.
Not into the slough.
It keeps going
It
farther
keeps
north.
going for about 3 miles.
Ah, okay, very
Yes.
good.
So the core of the program then is based on secondary clarifier addition. But as Mike mentioned, there's sort of a domino effect because we're putting facilities within a really tight footprint. Some facilities are adjacent. And at the same time, we have many other assets needed where they need improvements. So we looked at our currently planned projects and looked for projects that were adjacent to the secondary clarifiers or tied from a process or operational standpoint and combine them into this program so that we can get better benefits on constructability, sequencing, and then holistic design approaches. So this picture shows a site plan of the main treatment plant area, and it highlights the project areas that would be touched by this program. So it's a significant portion of the plant. The first area is where the new clarifiers would be put, and you could see here the structures are the existing composters. However, they haven't been used as composters for since the late 90s. They had been recommissioned as odor control facilities in early 2000, and they provide odor control for the solids handling building. So if we were to put clarifiers in that location, we would need to come up with new odor control facilities and also replace the buildings that you see in the background that are providing storage and they are providing staff space. These facilities are quite dated, actually, and so this program is going to alleviate the risks that would be associated with the tall structure with the composter.
So does the financial figure that you gave us right at the beginning, does that include new facilities?
Yes, the project cost estimate includes all the new facilities.
Okay, and if I'm understanding you correctly, there is no part of the process that is undone or doesn't happen as a result of this construction. It sounds like you're going to go ahead and create an alternative for your, I guess you describe it as odor control.
Yes.
So you will have to also put something in place to replace that prior to actually taking this offline so you can rebuild this as a clarifier.
Absolutely.
Is that right?
That is
Am I
correct.
The right sequence here? Okay. I
Yes.
see. Okay,
And
good. Thank you.
The benefit here is that the odor control system was going to have to be relooked at as part of our solids handling building improvements, which I'll present in a few slides.
And do you, in your slides, do you have a picture of what a clarifier actually looks like? Because I'm not sure I understand that.
Yes, it is. If you look at the site plan, you see the squares.
Yes.
So those are the existing clarifiers. So they're a
okay.
low-profile structure that are essentially full of water.
Okay.
So you see the tall composter structure then will be replaced by a low-profile structure, which from the public trail standpoint is going to be a benefit.
Okay, and so the existing clarifiers remain in place, you're just adding the
Yes,
capacity?
absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
So as part of the project, then we would replace the storage building and the staff building. And we have an area that's to the east, adjacent to the public trail, where we would put new buildings. And there it's about 15,000 square feet of storage and 5,000 square feet of staff space. As part of the program, when we put large clarifiers, they need to connect to the existing process units. So there's big pipes conveying water between the tanks. These pipes will run in what we call the utility tunnels. And the picture here you see is the existing tunnel. So you can see it's a pretty constrained area, constricted area, where constructability is going to be an issue, and it would be beneficial to have a contractor on board to help us develop the better approach for it. The project will then include the return activated sludge piping. That was a project that was currently in the CIP project, and we've incorporated in this program for added benefits.
What is liquor piping?
The mixed liquor is the liquid that comes from the aeration basins and goes into the clarifiers.
Thank you.
Not as good as it sounds.
It's those secret cocktail parties Commissioner Daly is wondering about.
I knew it.
I don't want to go.
As part of the work, again in the tunnels, we need to make connections to the new clarifiers, and these two circular facilities are actually boilers. They date from the original secondary expansion from the 70s. They run on biogas, and biogas now is a much more valuable resource for us, where we want to produce compressed natural gas and not necessarily building heat. These boilers are also in the way for us to connect with the new clarifiers. So the project includes the replacement of the steam boilers.
I'm sorry, so how will they be powered then?
That hasn't been determined yet. That would be part of a pre-design evaluation, but it could be natural gas or other means.
Very good, thank you.
Yeah. As part of the tunnel work, the electrical resiliency should be improved. We have motor control centers and transformers that are currently in the tunnel, and as Mike highlighted, there's a flooding risk in a tunnel. These MCCs are also obsolete, and as part of the project, we will need new electrical equipment, so it makes sense to combine the two needs and move the MCCs out of the tunnel and eliminate that flooding risk.
This particular slide is my least favorite part of the trip. There's a lot, I won't go into the details, but there's a lot of funky stuff going on with this equipment.
You can see in the picture some plastic sheeting over those large electrical control boxes.
Oh, and
That's because we have leaks. And
Yes.
big electrical equipment with leaks just don't mix very well. So,
correct. And we're going to replace both. We're repairing the leaks, and we're going to replace the pipe with a new one and take those MCCs out of the tunnel. So this one shows the biosolids processing building and a biosolids processing area. It includes activities that are called thickening and dewatering. It's associated with the biosolids that are eventually sent out to Eastern Oregon for a land application. The building is the source of the odors that are treated in the composter area. As part of the project, we will look at new technologies in the building so that we can be more efficient with the odor control system and perhaps reduce the size of the odor control system. The building itself is not code compliant, and for example, it has leaking skylights. It needs a seismic retrofit. So this aspect of the project includes also a large building retrofit. And then finally, the biosolids hoppers, which is the place where we put the biosolids before they're loaded up onto trucks, they're currently in the middle of the construction area, so we will look at moving them closer to the building and make that whole process more efficient. The aeration basins, well, we have done a lot of work in them as part of our secondary process improvement. That was part of our MAO. We were on a really tight timeline to make these process improvements. And when we did them, we realized that there were some structural issues that we could deal with in the basin. So it's essentially crack repairs and spall repairs on the vertical walls. The reason it's included in the program is that the processes are connected with the secondary clarifiers, and we can coordinate the outage requests. The project is also on the same timeline as the program, and so we've combined in the program.
Muriel, when these basins are fully activated, there's a lot of things going on there. How do you describe the microorganisms that are doing their business in these basins?
How do I describe the microorganisms? That is a
Am I right
very
that
good- The microorganisms, yes, they are absolutely in these basins. We have multiple zones in the basins, so that's what we've added in the past. We've added zones so that we could, the first zones are anaerobic, which means they don't have any oxygen, and we grow a specific kind of organisms in that case that will help, they kind of overcompete the others, and then they help settling in those secondary clarifiers. And then we move on to aerobic microorganisms, or they're aerated in the other parts of the process. And these are completely mixed, so we completely mix these tanks. And the microbiology then settles in the secondary clarifiers, and that's where we get those biosolids.
Interesting.
So how long would this whole process take from when the substance arrives at the plant until when it goes into the river?
That's a great question. I believe it depends on the flow rates and how fast they go, but I thought, I might have to go back on that, but I thought it was about 2 to 3 hours that we had
That's
estimated.
enough of an answer. I didn't know whether it was hours, days, weeks, months.
It's not days, but the biomass we do keep in the system. So the biomass that's why we have this, what we call return activated sludge. And so we return the biomass because we grow it. And this is actually the reason why we have a peak wet weather flow treatment process. Because if all the wastewater at peak flow was going through the biological system, it would wash out everything and we would lose our process. So we actually don't want everything to go through biological treatment.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And then finally, the last piece of the program is the storage buildings that are on the southwest part of the campus. These storage buildings are used for contractor equipment storage when we do construction, also for plant maintenance storage. We are going to upgrade them or maintain them. One's going to be demoed actually, and then the other one is just going to be a re-siding job and maybe adding some lighting to it. So the program budget, it's a planning level, so we haven't started the design. At this point, the construction cost estimate is $89 million. The total program cost estimate is $146 million. So again, this is a low level of confidence. It's a planning level. And for this ordinance today, we're focusing on the $89 million because this is related to the exemption to go with an alternative contracting method.
Okay, so the reason to get to the CMGC process is based partially on the December 2024 completion thought process, which under a standard low bid design, then bid, then build type process would be not achievable at all. The the CMGC process gives you more flexibility in designing the schedule. You can sequence construction. You can be doing more things at any one time because you're operating under kind of an umbrella type of operation. There are some very complex sequencing and maintenance operations here. The early field investigations that we can do as part of the whole process will reduce the construction risk. And when you're talking about $89 million worth of construction, there's always a significant risk, and anything we can do to reduce that risk is probably very, very much appreciated by the ratepayers. Early cost estimating and continuous flow of cost estimating increases your certainty so that when we actually say this is what we believe it's going to cost, then that's what it's going to cost. There, as council is aware, there are a series of mandated findings that are required in order to get us to this process. All of those findings have been vetted through procurement services and, more importantly, the city attorney's office, and all items are passed. The process allows for qualification-based selection as opposed to simply the idea behind low bid. Sometimes you do a low bid, you don't always get the best vendor. We have more flexibility here with achieving our certified firm type goals. As we move forward in different sections of the GMP, we're able to do more negotiating and more working with vendors, and our primary selected vendor.
What's the GMP?
Guaranteed maximum price.
Thank you.
And then, as stipulated in part of the findings, the thought process is that this whole thing is likely to reduce the overall project cost and increase value. The contractor constructability review, value engineering assistance, all those things kind of take place as you move forward, which greatly encourages or enhances your ability to make adjustments and changes and gain flexibility. We also have the ability in this to, as we go forward, we continually negotiate and work with vendors relative to participation by small and minority firms. Okay.
Thank you. So our next steps with the program is on September 30th, we need to send a notice to DEQ to state that we have begun implementing the work. We also have professional expert and technical services procurement. So this is for the design consultant selections. And then we've also, this is a large program, we are in the selection process for program support consultant to assist us managing a large program. And then with the exemption approved, CMGC procurement would follow.
Just to be clear, this construction contract would not really begin for over a year, is that correct, Mike?
Almost 2, I think.
Almost 2 years. So
Yeah.
we're talking about a lot of preparatory work here.
Yep, a lot of design.
And so we're going to hand deliver this notice to DEQ on Saturday, September 30th?
The
I only know that because it's my birthday. I'm just, I'm happy to do it myself. I hand deliver.
The begin implementing the work refers to we have money set aside.
Yeah.
We have
No, I'm kidding.
budget
Sorry.
and schedule, and that is what we're going to state to DEQ.
They may even give us till Monday. I'm just okay.
Also, with this program, we understand that it's a large amount of money, and we expect a lot of reporting, so we are committed to providing updates to the Portland Utility Board as requested and as the project, the program progresses. Similarly, with the Citizens Advisory Committee, we have a long-standing Citizens Advisory Committee at the Columbia plant. We regularly update them, and we'll continue to do so. The Citizens Utility Board, we will also provide updates as requested, and obviously City Council as needed per requirements and also as requested. So with that, we are requesting an exemption to the low bid contracting alternative in favor of a CMGC method for this program.
Very good. Colleagues, any questions? Is there public testimony on this issue, Susan?
We have 3 signed up.
Very good.
Ramfi Villatoro, please come up. Kelly Haynes and Janice Thompson.
Very good. 3 minutes each. Name for the record, please. And if you are a lobbyist, let us know so, although I see that none of you are.
Hi, I'm Kelly Haynes, here representing the Metropolitan Alliance for Workforce Equity today, which is a historic partnership between the carpenters, operating engineers, laborers, other unions, construction contractors, pre-apprenticeship programs, and community-based organizations. I want to say today thank you for considering an alternative contracting method for the Columbia Boulevard Wastewater Treatment Plant Secondary Expansion Program. I think this model helps ensure mechanisms that support increased positive stewardship of public resources, including broad community benefits in the workforce and contracting opportunities that can be made available during the construction phase. We applaud this as an important first step, but also want to encourage leadership to replicate a proven local model and embrace the use of a community benefits agreement on this project. The CBA pilots came in ahead of time and under budget. They exceeded nearly all diversity goals and targets. There was true community oversight and investment in community capacity building. There was transparency of data reporting and accountability of the contractors and subcontractors. The city already has an effective tool in the CBA, which the city could immediately use to align project activities with the insight and resources of community stakeholders. The CBA was approved by City Council in September of 2012 with Resolution 36954 and has achieved excellent results to date. By applying the CBA to this project, the city could ensure the project is structured to enhance city-community partnerships and realize tangible community benefits for all Portlanders. We are concerned that the city could be missing an opportunity to set a high standard in partnership with the community. And so we recommend that you seriously consider applying a CBA to the CBWTP.
So,
Thank you.
Kelly, thank you for your testimony. And when this panel is finished, I'm going to bring Mike Jordan back, and we're going to discuss that.
Great.
So we're prepared to put some things on the table and then engage my colleagues.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Commissioner Daly? No. Good afternoon.
Mayor, members of the commission, my name is Rainfeast Gentino Villatoro, and I am the Associate Director with Professional Business Development Group, which is a trade association that represents 30 to 40 minority and women-owned construction firms, as well as professional services in the Portland metro region. Our primary purpose is to improve the business conditions in construction to increase the utilization of MWESB firms. We have members who are general contractors, subcontractors, folks who are union firms, non-union firms. We have partners who do everything from excavation, electrical, landscaping, to like sheet metal. We have partners, sponsors. Prosper Portland's one of our partners / sponsors, TriMet as well. And so I'm here today to testify in support of the alternative contracting method for the Columbia Boulevard waste treatment plant, as well as the CMGC model. We have members who have worked on past projects like that. I've been told that this is something that they enjoy working on projects like that. I do want to have, I guess, a couple requests and questions. One in terms of the MWESB utilization, as it's a stated public benefit, better clarity around what the pre-plan is or the plan for to meet that what exactly are the utilization goals and what's the plan to meet those goals, and if it's possible to receive that pre-construction. And then I guess again for clarity around whether it's going to be a CBA or whatever format it will be to deliver the outcomes for the project. But ultimately, I'm here to say we have members who are interested in being utilized for projects, whether it's this project or other city projects. They have the capability to do this work, and we're willing to work with the city to meet its goals. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Good afternoon.
Hi, Janice Thompson, Oregon Citizens Utility Board, or CUB. So I've been kind of monitoring this kind of collection of activities for a while, so kind of anticipated this coming before you. And that's linked to kind of ongoing review of CIP plans, and I did my own tour out to the Columbia Boulevard wastewater treatment plant back in either 2014, 2015, and I do highly recommend it. So this is all based on the facilities plan update. There was definitely a previous plan, which is why there are some elements in the totality of this effort that have been in kind of in previous CIPs, and some elements are going to be new entries in the CIP plan process. The bottom line is all these pieces add up to a pretty big chunk of money, which is why I've been trying to track it all along. The primary driver is the regulatory requirements, so these are not discretionary efforts. Somebody who was very helpful, who's not here today, that I wanted to mention, is Matt Kriblitz. I checked in with him several times related to the permitting process, because how that worked out was obviously going to determine what was built. And definitely the goal of the permitting agencies is meeting the environmental protection requirements, and quite frankly, cost is not, to be part of that review, and that's appropriate. However, whenever the environmental goals can be met with less expensive projects, there's kind of a double win for ratepayers. And I see that double win here. There was a reference to this plan not having to go underneath, involve expansion west of Portland Boulevard that required expensive tunneling. In general, it's been described to me, and I think it's accurate, that this option is the second lowest cost, but provided the best overall reliability and resiliency benefits. And that's, CUB cares about those costs, but it's not all about just the lowest cost. You really want to hit that sweet spot. More recently, I was out and kind of for a briefing just on this topic, so thanks for Muriel and Paul and Scott for that. 2 quick notes. One is some buildings will be replaced as part of kind of rejiggering and kind of using just by virtue of not moving across Barton Boulevard, the site requires some rejiggering. So some buildings are going to be replaced. Buildings are also kind of a red flag. So I actually made a point of asking to go look at a couple of the small buildings that are involved in this that I hadn't, because they were really small. I hadn't seen them earlier on. And I just want to assure you that they are definitely kind of appropriate candidates for replacement. So it's not, and finally, the other question I asked is that the facilities plan update does call for additional work. So there could be subsequent projects that come before you, but it seems pretty clear that the scope of the future work won't be nearly at the level before you today. So it's kind of like there may be more, but there's not like anything at this scale coming. Those items may include more discretionary options, and we'll just be monitoring those. But just wanted to give you that update.
Thank you very much.
It's very helpful.
A question?
Commissioner Fritz.
Actually, a question for the first two testifiers. Commissioner Daly and I serve on the Metro Policy Advisory Committee, and they last session had a briefing on the new kind of all-inclusive. You're nodding, and that was my question. Have you been included in that? Something that was championed by former Chief Administrative Officer Fred Miller, pointing out that governments across the region do have lots of projects that aren't necessarily all at the same time, and that could help train and then use workers. Could you just let me know, have you been involved in that? And if not, what would you like us to do on that? Work Systems is leading on a Metro construction workforce market study, so we're managing that project to develop sort of the supply and demand in the region of, so we've interviewed all the major public agencies around their projects, over 15 million over the next 3 to 5 years, and then we're also working with state economists and the Bureau of Labor and Industry to develop, figuring out what is the supply of apprentices and women and people of color. So I think that study is meant to help inform this regional conversation, to help develop more standardization and coordination amongst the different agencies in the region and our respective goals. And we also helped host Seattle people last Monday, so we brought down Sound Transit, King County, and the city of Seattle to talk about the work that they've done up there to try to standardize in their region. So a lot of people from the city of Portland were there, and I hope that's a helpful way to at least keep that conversation going and learn from other parts of the country. Yeah, I thought it was quite exciting, and maybe you have something else to add, but I was wondering, do you think that could lead to a regional system of community benefits agreements that would have basically a structure that everybody would agree to? Is that something that you can see coming out of that? I think that's everyone's hope, so that we can be more efficient and coordinated, and I know contractors would like that too. And I know in Seattle they do try to do that, but everyone has their own legal departments too, so they have to sort of respect each other's differences, but also try to come together and coordinate where they can. Well, thank you. And Ramfis, are you and your organization involved in that?
We are not. A professional business development group is not. We would love to be involved. I mean, we have a really strong interest, obviously, on the contracting side when it comes to community benefit agreements. But I think in terms of the workforce, our main premise is it's really important to have good workforce diversity in the apprenticeship level, journey level, folks fitting in like to supervisor engineering roles to ultimately becoming owners themselves. And I think if the city and other regional partners want to push our DMW ESB goals, we should be really thoughtful around workforce diversity as well and training. So we actually have an impact meeting tonight, so if you'd like to give Sue your card, I'll make sure it gets to the people at Metro. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you both. Mayor, let's bring our panel back for a second. Mike Jordan, all three of you, if you could come back for a second. So, colleagues, let me tee it up this way. A handful of the biggest capital construction projects that the city's going to undertake over the next decade fall within the purview of the utilities, or are related to the work of the utilities. So I'm thinking Superfund. I'm thinking the Water Bureau's filtration, long-term planning, Columbia wastewater facility. There's other projects in the pipeline. So we obviously at BES and the Water Bureau are deeply committed to the community benefits model. Mayor, you are engaged in a process to update that approach with an eye to improving equity and inclusion efforts and contracting. This particular project doesn't, the construction doesn't start in 2 years. So my operating assumption is that the council's going to update, and I get lost in all the acronyms, but we're going to have a CBA, a CBP, call it whatever you want. We're going to come together around a plan that has broad support. And then that plan would apply to the large construction projects within the utilities. So I guess the question I have is, do we have a sense of when that's going to be brought? I was looking at the notable calendar, and I couldn't find it, but are we months away from having something come back to council?
We are within, it won't be months, it will be weeks.
Weeks.
And I just want to remind council, though we haven't taken a vote, there is an amendment on the table that has an exemption threshold of 25 million.
25 million.
Which would put this back, assuming if that gets approved by the council, it would put this back in the arena of a CBA.
Right, so the council has to act on that and has to create clear guidance as to how we're going to do the contracting. And then the utilities, which, as I said, have some of the largest contracts in the pipeline, need to then sit down and develop, consistent with the will of the council, an approach for how we go forward. And the goal is to take the community benefits model and boost the numbers that the council expects us to get. So I think that's as responsive. But I just want to be clear, today we're only asking for an exemption from the CMGs. We're asking you to approve the finding, we're not asking you to do anything today, it's a first reading. But we are proposing that we try this alternative contracting approach, which has broad support from the very people that want to see us also move forward on a community benefits agreement model. So that's a two-stage process, and we're awaiting council final action on the matter that you're leading there. I hope that clears it up. Mike, did I state that correctly?
I think you did, Commissioner. Thank you.
Colleagues, any more questions before we move it? All right, thank you very much. Excellent presentation. This is a first reading
Yeah,
of
very-
an
very well
emergency
done.
ordinance. It moves to second
Mind-numbingly
reading.
complicated, but well done.
All right, Susan, could you read the next three items, please? 73, 74, and 75.
1073, approve application under multiple unit limited tax exemption program for 54 Woodstock located at 5401 Southeast Woodstock Boulevard. 1074, approve application under multiple unit limited tax exemption program for 6012 Southeast Yamhill located at 6012 Southeast Yamhill Street. And 1075, approve application under multiple unit limited tax exemption program KOZ 1299 Southeast Ankeny, located at 123 Southeast 13th Avenue.
Colleagues, these three multiple unit limited tax exemption, better known as multi applications, are for developments which are complying with the inclusionary housing program that went in February 1st, 2017. These are the first three permits to go through the inclusionary housing process, aside from a handful of affordable housing projects which are receiving direct funding from the Portland Housing Bureau. The projects 54 Woodstock, KOZ 1299 Southeast Ankeny and 6012 Southeast Dam Hill are all providing affordable units for 99 years as part of the inclusionary housing program, having elected to provide units in their new developments that will be affordable to households earning up to 60 or 80% of area median income rather than paying the fee in lieu. The multi-program is one of the financial incentives provided to inclusionary housing projects providing affordable units, in addition to exemption of the affordable housing construction excise tax, and for projects providing units affordable at 60% of area median income or below, exemption of the system development charges. We obviously have the Housing Bureau experts here. Director Krieger, do you want to start us off?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you. By way of introduction, my name is Kurt Krieger, Director of Housing for the Housing Bureau. And with me is Dory Van Bockel, who is the Housing Program Coordinator. Dory is one of several Housing Bureau staff embedded at the Bureau of Development Services, so she splits her time assisting developers at BDS work through the permit process and to attain compliance with our new inclusionary housing policy. And I think it's profoundly important to recognize that these are the first three the first three projects to come forward to apply the affordability requirements. We are foregoing revenue in exchange for this as part of the offsets that you approved, and achieving 23 affordable units out of 170 total units. That constitutes about $74 a month in foregone revenue, so we think it's a bargain. And I'll let Dory explain the specific details since she worked directly with the developers.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Dory Van Bockel. Kurt covered quite a bit of it, as did the opening talking points by Mayor Wheeler. But it has been exciting to work through the first three permits and see projects moving forward. The particulars for all three of them happen to be that they're all outside of the central city in the mixed use zones around Portland. In southeast Portland, as a matter of fact, two of the projects have chosen to provide affordability at the 15% ramp up period that's available through the first couple of years of the program. So we'll have 80% of area median income units. And the third project is choosing to provide 8% of their units at the 60% level. And that, as Kurt mentioned, results in 23 affordable units. These are smaller than a lot of the projects that we are seeing in the central city, in that they are, three projects at a total of 170 units. There's 38, 87, and 45 units respectively, and primarily made up of studio units. So there will be 22 studio units and one bedroom unit for these particular projects in the first few that we have moving forward.
I have two questions. Good. Mr. Director, we were told that if we implemented inclusionary housing, the development pipeline would dry up and we'd kill off the market. So what does today's action tell us about the impact of this and of this legislative change and the marketplace?
Well, as you know, the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability is monitoring the effect of the policy. And Tyler Bump authored a report, which I think he distributed to you directly, about the 4-year supply of vested projects that were able to submit their necessary plans, conceptual plans, prior to February 1st. We fully anticipated that. What this tells me is that the market is now starting to adjust to the reality. We heard lots of doom and gloom from developers that were going to blame inclusionary housing policies for the downturn in the market. We're at the same time, as we crafted the offsets, we could prove in 2016 that developers were already overpaying for land. We did a residual land value analysis in 33 different parts of the city, and the frothy market was causing people to already pay too much for land. So land values will adjust according to the new entitlement requirements of the property. One thing that I think is really important to mention in this instance is that the regulatory agreement to attain affordability is a senior lien in front of the mortgage financing. And a lot of folks told us that couldn't be done, that it was impossible. The banks wouldn't do that. I felt it was particularly important because when I operated this program in Fairfax, we actually lost more units in the downturn than we produced because of foreclosure. The real estate foreclosure caused the regulatory agreement to cancel out the affordability requirements. In this case, we've spent the money, we've given the proceeds to the developer as the offset, and we want to make sure that the public value is secured and not at risk. So I'm actually very pleased that we're starting to show through very capable, agile developers that the policy can work, and that as time goes on, we'll see more of these.
My second question, Mr. Director, is, these are in areas of pretty high opportunity, if I'm imagining each of these addresses. So when downtown developers in the West End said, as they rushed to get their permits off cocktail napkins into the Planning Bureau to beat the deadline, it just doesn't pencil out. What have these developers learned about this penciling out that some of our downtown developers may want to reconsider?
Well, Dory speaks directly with them, so she might have deeper insight than I do.
I mean, certainly every development project is unique. I do see with the three of these being a little bit smaller projects, they are more local developers, not working with the larger capital investors, and so might have a little bit of a more simpler time with their financial structure. But I think they're also the ones willing to just be the first in the pool to move forward in that I think there's been a lot of just anticipation of seeing how everything truly plays out in the first few developments that go forward, and then others will start moving with it as well.
One other good indicator that the market is maturing and people are starting to conceptualize this. You may know the company Security Properties. It's a Seattle company, privately owned. John Marasco is the chief development officer, and I've known John for the last 25 years. They're the company that has gone non-refundable to purchase the Pepsi-Cola bottling plant on Sandy. It's 5 blocks. They envision full compliance with the inclusionary housing requirement. They also incidentally vested the Oregonian printing plant prior to February 1st. So they have both feet in the marketplace. They're doing pre-IZ and they're doing post-IZ. So I think it's going to be recognized as a fact on the ground. In this case, Security Properties is using a Chinese partner's equity, so they have a long-term interest in this marketplace. You might also like to know that they bought from Tom Kemper the affordable multifamily component at the Center Commons site, which is on I-84, previously owned by TriMet when it was a bus maintenance facility. So very clever developers are figuring this out, in this case, both small ones and large ones.
My last question is, if you divide the number of units in each building, you get different percentages. What am I missing? What's the...
Well, it's the ramp in that Dory mentioned.
Right. For the lower affordability level, so at the 60%, there's a lesser requirement. The guidelines were at 10% and then 20% for the 80% of area median income.
I see.
But up through the end of next year, outside of the central city, there was the legislative decision at council from you to have a ramp-up period of 8% and 15% respectively, so a little bit lesser amount.
So the combined is 13.5%.
But the idea is that the more affordable, we give them the requirement in terms of units goes down a little bit as we go more deeply affordable.
And that was part of the calibration of the program, recognizing the difference in the rents and the impact it has on the projects.
Thank you very much.
But again, the program was also calibrated in a way to make providing the units on site more attractive, as well as providing units at the 60% of area median income level, so that we are anticipating to see more projects opt for those. We have yet to see for sure, but this is a pretty good indication that it does work out that way.
Commissioner Fritz?
So you mentioned Security is one of the companies?
Security Properties.
Are they doing all three of these?
No, these are actually smaller developers. Security Properties is only doing the larger scales. They bought the Awami property in northeast Portland. They bought the old PNCA block in the northwest Portland. They've acquired with Urban Renaissance the Oregonian printing plant, and now they've bought the Pepsi-Cola bottling plant.
I see, thank you. Should we not be giving some credit to the developers of these particular projects for doing the right thing, stepping forward and doing it? When we hear lots in our emails about evil developers who are, just completely not following the rules, do you happen to know who these are?
Sure. So it's a group of individuals, on many of them with small LLCs. The project on Woodstock is being led by Stanley Hubert, and the Coes Development project is by Coes Development out of Seattle. They've done a handful of smaller unit projects that have benefited from the multi over the last couple of years, and they're led by Kathy Rains. And the Yamhill project is being led by Rudy Menzel with a group of about 17 different local investors on the site.
Well, hooray, all local people. And I have actually been briefed on the Coast style of development. That's another really exciting opportunity for smaller units for less price. I think it's great that they're operating in our community.
In a year from now, we'll see many more. That's my prediction. I mean, let's not forget that the hammering here, I think, was predictable, given that people rushed to get those permits in. And I find it fairly remarkable that some of the analysis out there doesn't reflect that obvious reality. And so what I'm hearing from people is, let's not put our cards on the table too quickly. As I've said many times, if we need to true this program up to make it successful, we'll be flexible enough to do that. But we really don't have a good enough data stream yet to be able to tell what the market is telling us. So I particularly appreciate Commissioner Fish's question, what does this tell us about the market? What it tells me is they've got nowhere else to go. And so the question really now is, what does it look like when we get back into a normal market cycle that isn't biased by the imminent deadline of the implementation of an IZ strategy? And we're probably months and months away from that reality.
As you know, this city has given our growth goals, we would like to see as many of those vested permits convert to actual projects as possible. So we remain open to discussing with those developers about how they might voluntarily convert their projects. The council, when on December 21st enacted the policy, said that we would recalibrate in 3 years. So we're prepared to do that in conjunction with BDS and planning and sustainability.
Very good. Is there any public testimony on these items?
One testifier, Mary Sipe.
Mary, you've been so patient today. Good afternoon. How are you today?
I am great. Good afternoon. My name's Mary Sipe, and I just want to, I kind of have a request. I'm really happy to see what's being reported today about these new units. It kind of comes in drips and dribbles to the city council. And when I see 22 units, and I know that the building, the affordable housing building that I live in has a waiting list with 350 people on it, and that other buildings aren't even taking waiting lists, and I know this is going to be at least 18 months to 2 years before they come to fruition, it's kind of hard to get the big picture of, is it water in a balloon, that we're dealing with, or what kind of progress are we making? And so kind of what I'd like to ask, especially since Mr. Krieger's here today, is for if a report could come to City Council that would sort of be an overview. In past several months, there have been a number of citizens who have come and they've accused you of not using the money that's been allocated for housing and not doing anything about the homeless issue, and where's the money going, how have you spent it, blah, blah, blah. And I can understand that, because I think as a private citizen, about the only way that we have to measure what progress is being made is by what we see on the streets and in the neighborhoods all over the city. And it doesn't look very promising when you look around and you see all the tents all over the city. So what I was thinking is, you know, I come to city council and I watch a lot of the work sessions and I go on the websites and I gather a lot of information for myself and then I try to put it together to get an idea. And I was just thinking if we could get some kind of like a report, kind of quantitative, you know, this is what we've identified. This is the number of homeless. These are the different categories of homeless people. These are the number of units that we need. This is how we're addressing this particular category. And this is when we expect these units to be available for occupancy, and just some kind of a progress report, and, you know, and something about, you know, here's the 20 million or whatever, 30 million, I think, in 2015 that was budgeted between the county and the city, and here's what we've done with it, and here's what we have left, would be really helpful. I think it would, I think it always helps to put a stake in the ground, even for the people that are working in all the various bureaus. And I think it'd be beneficial to city council too. I think you'd be, I think a lot of people would be surprised at the progress that is being made, that we're just not aware of if we don't go digging for it and, you know, sit at our computer for hours like some of the nerds like me do. So I just would kind of like to throw that out there. And then what I was also thinking is, you know, it's not a bad idea, you know, these reports that come to city council, like Paul Van Orden came and gave a report about the noise control office. If those reports could be put on the websites for the various agencies so that people could see, again, just kind of a little status report and just a request.
Very good. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
We appreciate it.
No, thank you.
And Kurt, I see you nodding in approval there.
Well, since I know your meetings have a larger viewership than just the people in the audience.
I sure as heck hope so.
Two things I'd like to mention. First, the Housing Bureau will continue going forward to produce the annual state of housing, and that will roll up the status of all programs and all projects. And I'm proud to mention that we have several new hires, including Uma Krishna, who used to be in planning and sustainability, left and went to Portland State University. So she's an in-house demographer. Excellent staff. We're also doing a deep dive into court eviction proceedings so that we will start to show that data as well as the status of our projects. And the Housing Bureau website has a map with a series of dots of works in progress, and people can click on any dot and they can see how many units and who the project sponsor is and what the status is. And our current portfolio is also on a very fine-grained interactive map. So all 14,000 units are mapped, and every one of our 33 projects in process, including vacant land that we've acquired, are also on the map.
So Kirk, can I make a suggestion? So I applaud what you just said, and the annual report has been a great addition to our conversation. The annual report that you give us looks like a phone book from a mid-sized city. And some of the stuff on your website for people that really want to drill down is there. What I hear Mary saying, and I actually think she makes a great point, is I think we should go back to a dashboard type approach. And there ought to be a link on the housing. You may already have it. I haven't been in charge of the Housing Bureau for a few years, but I think there should be a dashboard that you click onto, and it should have all the current data from a Home for Everyone, all the current data from a joint office, and it should have a year-to-year total of abatements, new units online, you know, that you can click onto. All that data, by the way, is available. But what I think is asking a lot, and I love that housing report. I mean, I actually have a signed copy from Dan Salzman on my desk. Is you know, if you have an evening and you dig into it, there's a wealth of information. But I think in this age, a dashboard with a few graphs and a running tally, I think that's what Mary's saying, so that she can say, look, homelessness is down a little bit, or more people in shelter beds, or here's the problem, we're meeting this need. And I would encourage you to do that, not for the budget exercise. Andrew and I have an ongoing debate about what actually should be a dashboard for the budget exercise, but for the public. And I'd make it as simple as possible, so if you had 5 minutes, you could get a snapshot of where we are. The data's all there, and I thank Mary for flagging that.
Excellent point taken. We met with Mayor Wheeler yesterday on the design of the website specifically for the housing bond, Portland's housing bond.
Yeah.
Because we want it to have its own identity so it doesn't get lost in the workflow of the Bureau generally. So I hear you, and we'll respond with as concise a data as we can possibly sort of distill from the fine-grained detail that's already available.
Commissioner Fritz?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd go one further, and having the Cliff Notes is also helpful, as well as much detail. Some of us do one and some of us do the other. I noticed that the mayor's advertising for 2 of the 3 positions that were authorized in the budget, and one of them is for a digital information specialist. So what I would really like to see is from the very front page of the city's website, more dynamic links to this week's, something that was a hot topic or will be a hot topic at City Council, and where to find that thing that Director Krieger was mentioning with the direct link to that. The amazing work that's being done in the Office of Management and Finance with the report to PDX and the camp cleanups and such. If people, each of our constituent specialists would be able to say, these are the most asked about issues this week. Always there's issues with people living outside. And so to make it very easy for people who are saying, what on earth is the city doing? They must be doing nothing, to then get to the report PDX every week. Because we're doing a lot. Mm-hmm. And yes, we still need to do a lot more. I have found that sending people that information makes them recognize that, yes, it is still worth continuing to work on all of these things, because we can get there. And I think this particular set of tax exemptions shows you do it one at a time. And now we've got 23 at a time, and that's fabulous.
Yeah, that's a good start. Commissioner Daly?
I'd just like to say that I'm glad that we're not rushing to conclusions about IZ, because of course I've heard from many developers that it doesn't pencil out. I'm getting custom pencils made that say try harder, by the way. And that the softening of the market has something to do with our IZ policy, when we know that perhaps the overbuilding at the market and luxury rate level has a little more to do with the softening of the market. And the fact is that many developers are not building to the demand that exists here, and the demand is for affordable housing for people who earn less than 120% of MFI or less than 100. So just glad to know that we're waiting for those results to kind of clarify themselves before we change our policy.
Very good. Any further questions? Please call the roll on 1073.
Salzman.
Well, I'm very happy to see these developments step up to take advantage of the inclusionary housing program. I think they recognize the larger goals that we have as a city and indeed as a state, which authorize cities to implement inclusionary housing policies. So it always takes a few brave souls to be the first ones to step over the threshold, and that's usually a precursor of more to follow. And I do indeed think that's exactly what's going to happen. I think that's the sentiment up here from all of us. And I think it's just a question of waiting for that tremendous backlog of units that were vested before the deadline to dissipate, either through their permits expiring or projects changing or the projects get built. Either one of those three. So anyway, I'm grateful to the developers here who stepped up, grateful to the Housing Bureau for doing good work on this. Please vote aye.
Udaley.
I guess I'd just like to echo Commissioner Saltzman's sentiments, thank these developers for being willing to build some of the housing that we desperately need, and thank you to the Housing Bureau and BDS. Aye.
Fritz.
When I heard that we had, was it something like 18,000 permits that came in the week before, up to the deadline, I wasn't expecting to get anything like this for at least another year. So I'm very encouraged that there are good local developers who are willing to invest in our community and take advantage of this program. And 23 units for $74 a month is what I heard. That's a a great contribution. And yes, we are doing our part too with the tax abatement. So thanks to Director Krieger, thanks to Dori van Brocken. I knew I could ask you a question that I hadn't asked you beforehand, because you always have the knowledge at your fingertips. So thank you for knowing about those local developers and being in BDS to help people see that, yeah, you can do this. It's others have done it, and hopefully this is the beginning of others saying, I want to invest in our community. I want to invest in the people in our community to build affordable units. Aye.
Fish.
Yeah, there's a lot to like here, and I appreciate it's a 99-year regulatory agreement. I appreciate that it's in neighborhoods that people are going to want to live in. I appreciate the fact that smaller developers are taking the plunge and are going to sort of stress test this and prove to maybe some of these bigger developers that it works. I also like the fact that when you compare the foregone revenue under the multi-program, under our normal tax abatement programs with the 10-year abatement here targeted exclusively to the unit and not the whole building, this is just a much better return for taxpayers. And Dan carried a lot of the water on this to bring it to this point. So thank you, Commissioner Salzman. Aye.
Wheeler.
I'd like to add my thanks to Director Krieger and Dori. Thank you for your great work on this. I want to acknowledge two people in my office who have done a great job of leadership on these issues and helping me. I'd like to acknowledge Andrea Valderrama, who's hiding in the back there, and Cupid Alexander, who is very intentionally hiding behind the column back there. They have been extremely helpful to me in this process. I would just conclude by saying good start, more to come. Ordinance is adopted because I am also voting aye. Next item, 1074, call the roll.
Salzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
Commissioner Fish reminded me, thank you, Commissioner Salzman, for all the work you did getting the inclusionary zoning done at the state level. Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Please call the roll on 1075.
Salzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Thank you for your great work on that. Next item, we have 1076, a second reading.
Item 1076, adopt the Transportation System Development Charge Update 2017 Rate Study, establish an updated rate schedule, and amend code effective January 1, 2018.
Please call the roll.
Salzman.
Well, I want to start off by thanking staff and the public for a great collaborative process at the Portland Bureau of Transportation when they took on the task of updating the Transportation System Development Charge. I do want to also acknowledge in particular Christine Leone, Ann Hill, and Rich Eisenhower for their work here. There are always challenging efforts, and no one is thrilled to pay more fees to the city. But as we saw from the testimony 2 weeks ago, the public does understand the need to keep our infrastructure up to the task of dealing with our growth. And it really is that testimony and support that I want to highlight, and thank staff for helping to create that environment. We made some fundamental changes on how we're now looking at transportation impacts through our person trips calculations, and this is going to go a long way in expanding our transportation system for all modes. Something I know the folks who dug in the details on this now understand and support. So thanks again to staff and all of my colleagues for their staffs delving into this well as well. And I believe we're going to have a very good transportation SDC in the future here. Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Salzman, for your leadership on this and for accepting some of the guidance from the Parks folks who had done a similar kind of methodology. I think both transportations and parks is actually now easier for community members to understand the impact fees that developers pay on new construction. So I appreciate both. I also appreciated that you got back. One of the questions at the first reading was, should we have more tiers? And so we got the information that I think it's 5 tiers that we have in parks based on the size of the housing, that we don't see a lot of rushing to build things that are just underneath the next threshold. So although that's good in some ways that we're not affecting the market, it's also awareness that giving encouragement to do smaller units, which might then be more affordable, doesn't so far seem to be having that desired effect. Thank you very much for your work on this, and also to Director Leah Treat and your staff. Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Thank you very much. Please call the roll on 1078.
Authorize a contract with Stanek Consulting Services in the amount of $3,325,000 for the corrosion control improvements project. Salzman?
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
We haven't forgotten you, Parks. We're just doing the 2 second readings first. Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The contract is approved. Please call the roll on 1079.
Approve findings to authorize an exemption to the competitive bidding requirements and authorize the use of the alternative contract method of construction manager general contractor in connection with the corrosion control improvements project for an estimated amount of $11 million. Salzman?
Aye.
Udaley?
Aye.
Fritz?
Aye.
Fish?
Aye.
Wheeler?
Aye. The ordinance is approved. Thank you. Last item, item 1077, please.
Authorize an intergovernmental agreement between Portland Parks and Recreation and Metro to establish the roles of each party in the North Portland Greenway Trail segments 1 and 2 via the Columbia Boulevard Bicycle Pedestrian Bridge Project.
Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you, Mayor. Portland Parks and Recreation is partnering with Metro to complete the North Portland Greenway Trail segments 1 and 2 via the Columbia Boulevard Bicycle Pedestrian Bridge Project. Parks is very excited about this project, and we've identified $204,699 in system development charges, as we were just talking about, the impact fees that is paid on new construction, as matching funds for the project. This will increase the capacity of Portland's parks and recreation system. And we're now wanting to enter into an intergovernmental agreement to provide for Metro to lead the effort to design, engineer, fund, and construct the project, and for Parks to provide decision-making and oversight roles with the project. Turn it over to staff. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. I'm Maya Agarwal, City Planner with the Portland Parks and Recreation Bureau. Portland Parks and Recreation is partnering with Metro to complete portions of the North Portland Greenway Trail via the Columbia Boulevard Bicycle Pedestrian Bridge Project. In 2014, the Oregon Department of Transportation awarded Multimodal Transportation Enhanced Program grant funds to Metro to design, engineer, and construct portions of the North Portland Greenway Trail from Chimney Park to the existing St. John's Landfill Bridge via a multi-use trail bridge over North Columbia Boulevard. Several city bureaus have an interest in the project, including Portland Parks and Recreation, the Bureau of Transportation, and the Bureau of Environmental Services. Portland Parks and Recreation supports the project and has identified $204,699 in SDCs as matching funds for the project. The project will increase capacity of Portland's parks and recreation system. The North Portland Greenway is part of the 40-mile loop, a regional trail identified by Metro Council, and the project will complete a gap in the 40-mile loop.
Do we have a picture of that or a map?
Yes, ma'am. So the project that we're talking about here is the dotted yellow line.
Thank you.
Other planning documents that identify this section of trail include the city's 2035 comprehensive plan, Portland Parks and Recreation's North Portland Greenway Trail Plan, PBOT's Transportation System Plan, and Metro's Regional Active Transportation Plan. It's anticipated that design and public engagement for the project would occur between 2017 and 2019, with construction occurring between 2020 and 2021. Metro and the city now wish to enter into an intergovernmental agreement to establish the roles, responsibilities, terms, and conditions of each party's participation in the Columbia Boulevard Bicycle Pedestrian Bridge project. Metro and the city have negotiated an agreement that provides for Metro to lead the effort to design, engineer, fund, and construct the project, for Portland Parks and Recreation to provide decision-making and oversight roles, and for PBOT and BES to provide advisory roles for the project. This agreement has been approved as to form by the city attorney,
We ask Portland City Council to authorize the intergovernmental agreement between Metro and the city to establish these roles, allowing the Columbia Boulevard Bicycle Pedestrian Bridge project to go forward.
Could you put the map back up again, please, in case there's questions from council?
I'm sorry?
Could you put the map back
Oh.
up, please?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sure if council has questions on the actual location or...
Looks good.
Where is Chimney Park exactly? I mean, I see the map, but there's no street names on it, and I'm not familiar.
Yes, it's along Columbia Boulevard. If you know where Pier Park is, so it's in North Portland. If you know where Pier Park is, it's just to the north of that.
Oh, okay, thank you.
And the bridge goes over...
Over Columbia Boulevard. Yes, ma'am.
Great.
Very excited about it. Thank you very much.
Good project. Any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up?
Any further questions, colleagues? You're going to get off easy today. Looks like a popular project. Please call the roll.
Salzman?
Yeah, it looks great. Aye.
Udaley?
Very exciting to give pedestrians in particular a route over Columbia rather than on it. Aye.
Fritz?
Well, thank you, Ms. Agarwal, for your presentation and for all your work on this, and Brett Horner in Parks as well. It's, people sometimes are concerned about both the cost of development and the amount of development that's happening. So it's good when we have projects like this which are going to increase capacity for all, particularly as this is going to be designed as pedestrians and bicycles. So that, of course, means all accessibility for people using wheelchairs or strollers and other things too. So it's a really exciting project and one that the North Portland community has championed for a very long time. So thank you to all who are in the North Portland Greenway Advocacy Group. Aye.
Fish is absent, and Wheeler.
This is a growing area. There's more traffic. There's more concern about bicycle and pedestrian safety on Columbia Boulevard. Very happy to see this one. This is a no-brainer. Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Thank you for your good work. We look forward to seeing the final product. Oh, guess what? And with that, we are adjourned.
All right.